I was once told of an ancient proverb that goes something along the lines of, there's no such thing as a cheap Porsche. Now, I don't know who wrote that garbage, but they clearly hadn't heard of Craigslist. I was able to find this 1999 Porsche 911 in black over tan with a manual transmission just a few states away. The price, $6 grand. It's the cheapest 911 I've ever seen for sale. But of course, there is a catch. There's always a catch. Just like my original 911 Turbo that turned into an ignorantly expensive dream build, coolant's found its way into the oil of this 3.4 liter power plant. Which means we're about to have to go through this again.
That's no bueno.
Only this time, instead of going off the rails with a build, I've set a goal of getting this Porsche 911 back on the road for under 10 grand, truly making it the cheapest ever. We got 4 grand left in the budget and I have no clue what's wrong with it. Call it delusion, but I think it's gonna be doable. And while the engine itself might be toasted, as for the car, this thing is clean.
I can't believe you just paid 6 grand for this.
Clean, wow. Clean. I can't recall another time in my life, at least, where I've bought a project car sight unseen from multiple states away, it showed up and been 10 times better than I expected.
It never happened.
It does not work that way. The interior's in pretty good shape, though it's not my first color choice. Tan is not for me.
I do like this steering wheel.
No, the 4-spoke steering wheel,
it's just...
nobody likes that, come on.
It's way better than the 997.
No, it's not.
It is.
Now, I know some of you guys may have noticed this guy stuck in the steering wheel. And that's because the other day, we ran into a little bit of an issue with the car. Yeah, we need a new steering wheel. That's
If you have to play a CD, which one will it be?
Look, it's a $6,000 Porsche. We can't be picky about it. Maybe I'll put an Apple CarPlay head unit in it once we get it back on the road. As clean as this thing is, none of it's gonna matter whatsoever if we can't fix this. The good news, however, is it supposedly still starts.
Okay.
Well, you gotta try to crank it. You don't remember the whole thing from my car?
I'm just nervous, you know.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Okay, it sounds fairly healthy. What's the oil pressure doing? As far as oil pressure goes, that's normal. I mean, that looks better than my 911. 116,000 miles, runs in, hopefully drives. It has oil pressure. It's in beautiful condition. Even knowing what we're about to get ourselves into, I can't help but feel like we stole this car. Well, that's it. If we take this thing apart and manage to not be able to put it back together, I suppose that's the last time this Porsche is ever gonna run. Now's where the fun starts. This is my first time under it, and it's not the cleanest. The exterior, the interior, they definitely surpassed expectations. This is about what I would expect from a 25-year-old Porsche. One thing that should make this a little simpler than our 997 Turbo projects, these are strictly rear-wheel drive. We don't have that drive shaft going to the front. We don't have a front diff. We should be able to drop this engine and trends down as one piece fairly easily. I did just catch a sneak peek of some yellow struts. I have to assume they're Bilsteins, and they are, but on my way up there, I also caught this, which is a recurring issue on these Porsches that have the lines exposed underneath the car. The important ones, the fuel, the brakes, they all seem to be intact, the power steering. If I had to pick one to be damaged, I guess it would be the AC. Considering how old this car is and what we paid for it, I can't be mad at all at the shape it's in. Things like the brake calipers are just in beautiful condition. The underside's a little dirty, but again, beggars can't be choosers. And now that we've given it a quick look over, I suppose it's about that time. This never gets any easier.
No.
Full disclosure, this is the first 996 I've ever touched. I think this is the coolant drain. It kind of looks the same as the 997s, so we're just gonna go for it.
Nope.
Nailed it. Just a regular Porsche guy now.
It looks good though.
Sorry, let me go get the coolant out of my eyes, then we'll talk about this. Good news, the coolant system does pressurize, and it does it in 30 seconds as well. Didn't expect that, and I am well aware that there's somebody watching right now that's thinking, the guy that just sprayed himself in the face with coolant in the first 2 minutes the car was on the lift, is about to try to rebuild this engine himself. Yeah, it's probably going to go exactly as well as you think it is. But the good news here, the coolant's clean. There's no oil in the coolant. And if you remember on my 997 Turbo, while the coolant was still pink, after a while, it started draining this white, goopy, nasty shit that I don't see here. So we just got our mistake out of the way early. We're due one every single episode. It just happened really early and it was really dumb. Now this is the part that I expect to feel very familiar.
3, 2, send it.
You know something bad's about to happen when you have to count it down. Yep, ooh, there we go. You're getting real pro at this now. This is unfazed. Doesn't even matter. At this point, I feel like I'm exclusively buying cars where the engine oil looks like this or it's just straight water. 3, 2, 1. Oh. Maybe this is just me getting beat down by this kind of stuff at this point, but it's not that bad. The stuff I've been buying lately has been full of actual water. This is something. It's not clear, so that's a plus.
We're making a progress.
I think so. We can call it that. I should compliment the under tray, which is held on with a combo of Phillips screws, 10mm plastic nut, which is the proper equipment, and zip ties. Ah, yes, there's more zip ties, this time on the shifter cable there. I'm not sure if we have a broken cable or a broken bracket, but we will have to take care of that. I'm not going to reinstall these that way. Figure while we're under here and already soaked in miscellaneous fluids, it makes sense to just go ahead and disconnect everything else. One thing that is quite different compared to the 997 stuff I'm usually working on, this right here. This is an old school, by Porsche standards, throttle cable. What is that? We're double nutted up on the transmission mount on one side, the other side's not. That's exactly how it should be. I'm hoping we don't have a bad stud up there or something weird going on. I feel like that's much closer to the way this is supposed to be done. Well, while this may have been an eventful start to the whole rebuild project we have going on here, we're not surprised by anything. The oil looks bad. I'm happy to know the coolant looks good. We're not going to know anything until we get this engine out.
So that means...
Yes. Oof, check out those exhaust ports. They're disgusting on the driver's side. On the passenger, though, they're dry, they're nice, they're everything you would want. I don't know exactly what we can infer from that at the moment, but it's certainly a clue. Ah, yes, beautiful. As for what's on the bottom of the car, that's pretty much it. Now, if you watch my 997 Turbo series, you know it was the first Porsche I'd ever dismantled. I went on and on about how simple they were. As one might imagine, this 996 with no turbos, no intercoolers, no front diff, no drive shaft, it's mind-numbingly easy. One might say it would have been wise to start with the 996 and then move up, but hey, we don't exactly do things by procedure here. The engine mounts are loose, the trans mounts are loose. Everything underneath's done, everything in the engine bay's done. To the best of my knowledge, the only things left are those two power steering lines back there, but I think they're gonna be a little easier to disconnect once we have it dropped down and we have some space to work with. I thought this bundle of lines stuck to the chassis side, so I forgot a coolant line there, no big deal. Well, we didn't forget something, but we did break something.
And that's me.
Yeah. The sway bar bolts, who put those back in?
I took those.
I'm gonna sit here and pretend like I knew they couldn't go back in, even though I had no clue. All right, no harm, no foul, lesson learned. We're down one coil pack, but not a big deal. On the monstrosity scale, this M96 engine comes in far, far below the 997 turbo assembly that we just dropped out recently. It's fairly compact, there's a lot less going on, but that doesn't change the fact that now that it's time to rip this thing apart, we're in completely uncharted territory. Other than the one obvious issue we have here, the engine's in fairly good shape. It's pretty much what you would expect. It's typical of the mileage. It's a little dirty, it's a little wet, but it's not the biggest deal. We didn't find any other true damage to it. The exception being when we destroyed this coil pack here, which funny enough it does plug in, it would probably be reusable, we're just not going to do it. It prompted me to check the rest of them, one of which has a severely broken connector. Now as for what's next, there's essentially 4 things that could be causing our intermix issue, 2 of which are relatively easy to fix, 1 of which is definitely not fun, but it's doable, it's manageable, and the 4th is pretty catastrophic. Numero uno, this guy right here. It's the air oil separator. They are pretty prone to failure. They can cause intermix, but not often in the way we see it here. Couple that with the fact that these clamps have obviously been messed with. I'm leaning towards the fact that this has been replaced at some point. It's probably not our culprit, but we are going to replace it. They're only $100. It kind of fits in our slim budget, and I figure we'll do it while we're in here because why not? Number 2, this guy right here, the engine oil cooler. This thing has coolant and oil running through it. It uses the coolant to cool down the oil, and by the looks of it, I'm going to say it hasn't been replaced. This is a slightly more likely culprit than our air oil separator. Unfortunately, they do sell tools to test it. Now, if it ends up being either of those things, we're going to consider ourselves incredibly lucky. And that's because they're both easy to replace, they're both cheap, and most importantly, they're both external. We don't have to tear down the engine, which is not the case for option number 3, a cracked cylinder head. Unfortunately, if I had to make an early guess, I'm going cracked cylinder head. It's a super common problem with the 3.4s and the 3.6s. Ultimately, it seems like almost every intermix issue that gets posted about ends up being a cracked cylinder head. Definitely not the answer we want, but I am well prepared for it to be that. If that does end up being the case, it's not going to be ideal, but I think we'll stay on our budget, and I think we'll get the car running for under 10 grand. We will have a lot of O-rings and gaskets to replace if we do that, but it's not going to be killer. Now, option number 4, and this is the bad one. That would be not a cracked cylinder head, but something in the bottom end, like say a sleeve. If that ends up being the case, it's going to be more cost effective just to buy a used engine. In which case, our budget is f***ed. We can speculate all we want, but we're not going to find out anything until we start digging in. First thing on the agenda, testing the oil cooler. There is one other somewhat obscure failure point that could lead to our issue of intermix here, and that's the O-rings that go under the heat exchanger. I'm pretty convinced that's not the case. To create the issue of intermix without leaking down the sides, without leaking onto the block, it would have to be leaking right there and pretty much there only. I think it's highly unlikely. Of course, those are going to get replaced once we stick this guy back on there, so if it is somehow, some way that issue, I suppose it's going to resolve itself. Now to test this fine hunk of metal, we're going to bust open this new M96 engine heat exchanger tester from Stomsky Racing, which ironically has a smiley face on it that will be a pretty accurate representation of me if this ends up being our issue, though again, it's unlikely. Don't get your hopes up. That is, of course, me talking to myself. Either way, there's not a better feeling, at least to me, than opening and using a new tool. This piece is super sick. You put some air pressure in it, it'll tell you whether it's leaking from the water side, the oil side, or no side, which I suspect is the case here. I know usually we want our parts to test good, but in this case, I really wish it wasn't holding all this pressure. Either way, with the failures that these things are prone to, someday down the road, this awesome tool is going to save us a ton of time and a ton of money. It's just not today. Being that we didn't get lucky this time, that of course means this engine's going to have to come apart. While generally that's not an issue, this time we actually have to put it back together and do so functionally. Given the fact that I've never touched one of these engines before in my life, that might be an issue. Not looking so hot, huh?
Not bueno at all.
No, that's not great. Not what I was expecting at all. It might be a little tough to see, but that center cylinder, there is a lot of coolant there. I don't know why that's happening. I expected to find a bunch of oil, and of course there is a ton of oil. All of them look particularly disgusting, but cylinder number 2 is the major concern. There's a lot of just sitting coolant. It is a little hard for me to comprehend how we just had this thing running and somehow there's coolant sitting on top of the valves. Next up, a leak down test. Now keep in mind, the failure we're looking for, intermix, isn't always going to show up in this test. But before we put any time or money into this motor, we at least need to make sure it's otherwise good. All right, so 12, 10, 12, not terrible. Go ahead and pull it. Hey, leak down's good. Leak down's under 10%. So at the very least, there's not a hole in the skirt, there's not a hole in the piston. We're looking okay. Ironically, the cylinder that I thought was going to be the worst leaked down the best. We had some that are almost up there towards 20. It's not super atypical of what I'd expect out of an engine this old. Now that we passed our leak down test, we can move forward with disassembling this engine with relative confidence that once we find the cause of the intermix, fix it and reassemble the engine, we're gonna have a good, healthy motor. Of course, we had to bust open another brand new toolkit from CTA Tools. This lets us lock the cams in place. It has a pin to keep the engine in top dead center. We've already set top dead center on cylinders 1 through 3, and those are the ones we're gonna be fumbling our way through first. Yikes, that looks a little familiar on a Porsche. If that little preview is any indication, this is about to be nasty. I do suppose the internals could look worse. Just the stuff that's supposed to be lubricating them looks bad. There's no other way to put it. It's just nasty. For as bad as this looks, there is a bright side. If you look past that just nasty, milky substance and look at the cam journals, they're in really nice shape. That should be the last thing we need to pull the cylinder head off. I have said that off camera like 5 times and it hasn't been, but I think we might have just got it. You see what I see? Uh-oh, that ain't good. Let me go ahead and sit this cylinder head over here. We'll talk about what I just saw. That whole budget thing that I was just talking about is done. What do you think's funny here? What's funny, Fernando? I don't see anything funny.
Oh my, even the nails stuck there.
That large crack in the cylinder liner is the start of what's known as a D-chunk failure. It means the engine needs re-sleeved, which costs significantly more than we paid for this car. This is absolute worst case scenario, but if you're into buying junk cars like this, you kinda gotta roll with the punches. It's just how it goes. Re-sleeving this is beyond cost prohibitive. So the question now is, what do we do with the car? Do we swap it? Do we get another stock engine? I don't know. Well, guys, after thinking long and hard, I decided on a path forward with the 996. Is it the right option? Hell if I know, but we went with it. Under this cover sits the new power plant for the 996, and honestly, it's probably not what they were expecting. Just do it. Just do it.
You gonna live it to the owners?
It's the same exact engine.
For it.
I can explain. Really, I can explain. Usually I would have taken this damage that we found and used it as an excuse to go crazy. I'd have spent a ton of money, we'd have LS'd it, we'd have done something wild with it, but I think I've concocted a plan to keep this build under $10,000. I think. Step 1, lowball somebody on eBay. Every single one of these engines that I could find on eBay that was manual transmission and a cable throttle body ran between $10,000 and $12,000. So I took a shot in the dark on this one, which has similar mileage to the one that came out of the car, and offered $7,500, to which they immediately accepted. Step 2, sell all of our remaining parts from the damaged engine on eBay Motors to try to recoup as much money as we possibly can. And step 3, pray that we make it under $10,000. And if we don't, we just have to take solace in the fact that this car would have cost us $15,000 to $17,000 if it was clean, running, and driving, and will surely be under that. Is it the fun option, or even the option that I would have really liked to have done? Absolutely not. But when I bought this car, I set out with a goal. And given that that goal is still possibly attainable, I feel like it would have been kind of dumb to switch paths now. Oh, and all my credit cards are maxed out from the last Porsche build, so there's that. Now, if we weren't able to get ourselves a smoking deal on this engine, which has a 6-month warranty, I might add, this whole thing shakes out a lot different. It probably turns into some crazy expensive project that sits around the shop for the next 6 months. For once, at least so far, we stuck to the plan. Maybe this is that discipline thing you guys are always talking about. Of course, in theory, this all sounds great. The plan is back on. We're gonna have our sub $10,000 911, but it only works, of course, if the engine's good. At least the plugs look good. That's a start. Remember that last one was covered in oil? We don't have that going on here.
This is where I come in and completely jinx it and tell you that there's absolutely no way that one of these is gonna leak down at 30%. There's just not, no way. It's not possible.
God damn.
Right? Porsche motors don't do that.
I'm not taking the bait here. He's right. There's no way it's going to leak down at 30%. We're all 10s and under. He's just stating facts.
Good.
Like I said, just facts, under 10 all the way across the board. Now that we have a good leak down in hand, I want to do one more thing. I want to get a look inside the cylinders because as we learned last episode, a good leak down's not everything. And to do that, to get a look inside this engine, we're going to bust out our brand new, very non-name brand borescope. That, of course, I'm now realizing I ordered like the commercial plumbing version, not the one that's meant for a car, but I mean, I suppose it'll work.
You're supposed to check the future with that?
Let's see what's going on here. Stop it. This is serious business. If we have a bad engine here, I'm going to be in some financial trouble, all right? I can just see it now. Just this piston comes down and there's a big crack. First one. All right, so I got to admit, for a $200 borescope, the picture on this is pretty good. This cylinder, at least, is looking pretty solid. I'm going to take a look through the rest of them, hope that they all look this good, and if that's the case, I think we're going to have our winner. The cylinder walls aren't by any means perfect, but overall, they look good. I don't see the beginning of that crack failure in the cylinder liner anywhere. I feel fully confident in installing this once, of course, we do a little more maintenance to it. We're gonna tackle all the normal stuff you'd expect, like spark plugs, but there are some things that we're gonna have to attend to that we probably shouldn't have to be doing. Unfortunately, it looks like the salvage yard that dismantled this car kind of took the quick route. They cut some hoses that they probably shouldn't have. Lines like these, the fuel lines, they're not a big deal. We have to unscrew those anyway, just like we did on our car. But lines like these power steering lines that run all the way under the intake manifold, under the AC compressor, over to the power steering pump, lines like this set of coolant lines here, those had places to be disconnected, they just weren't used. Now, of course, on our engine, we didn't cut anything, so we should have all the lines we need. I'm hoping that this ends up being nothing more than a little extra labor. We're gonna start this segment of the video with a quick PSA. If you find yourself in the market for a used engine, do yourself a favor and check for vital hoses being cut. Now, would this have been a deal breaker if I noticed prior to purchasing it? No, it was still a good deal, it was a fair price, I'm happy with the purchase. But spending an entire afternoon swapping all these hoses around definitely wasn't in the budget time-wise. Regardless, slight hitch in the plans aside, we got it done. I did, however, notice a few interesting things about this engine. This is also from a 99 Porsche 911, manual transmission, same trim. It should have been pretty much identical, but this lower coolant hose here, this one takes a, I don't know, 150-degree bend. This one takes, I don't know, less, we'll call it that, 60 degrees. Given that difference, our uncut coolant hose off the original engine doesn't fit. So once we get the engine in the air, we're gonna have to swap out to this coolant hose. It shouldn't be a big deal. It's just somewhat interesting to me. I can't tell you why those things are different, but if those are the only problems we're running into, I'm definitely gonna call it a win. As long as there's not something else hiding under here that maybe all you guys are aware of, and I have no clue is about to hit me in the face. The original engine in this car had an IMS bearing already done to it. LN Engineering, I'm hoping that this one does as well. And it looks stock. We got lucky once on our original engine, no such luck this time. This is 110% the original IMS bearing, and we're gonna have to address that before we put it in the car. And fast forward 1 week, we did it. Brand new LN Engineering IMS retrofit kit. We have a brand new rear main seal, brand new cam seals, and of course, all the tools we need to install them. If there's a bright side to the way this whole build's laid out, is that this now somewhat feels like deja vu since we've done half of this before on the old engine. Now we should be able to pull this plate off and yank the whole assembly out. Smooth.
You're almost ready to have another Porsche. Woo!
It happened again. There's another change of plans. So chances are some of you guys watching are familiar with the naturally aspirated engines, or you've played with an IMS bearing before. You might have caught this before I did. It turns out any of the IMS bearings that have this large 22mm nut instead of the smaller 12-point nut on it, they're non-serviceable. The non-serviceable IMS bearings were in, I believe, the 06 to 08 997s, which of course means that LN Engineering kit that we just bought, useless. Absolutely useless. You can see this bearing's much larger than the older ones. You can't even pull it through the case, so to replace or mess with this bearing, the whole case has to get split. And while this is almost comical at this point, the struggles we're going through trying to replace this stupid bearing, it's actually not bad news. I spoke with LN Engineering and they said these bearings are ultra reliable, which means we can just slap the motor back together and then continue on with our reliability mods. But before we slap this cover back on and get on with the whole deal, they said there's one thing I need to do to this bearing, and that's pull this outer dust seal. From what I've read, the reason they say to do this is because it's going to allow a lot more oil to get to the inside of that bearing, thus prolonging its life, which is a good thing given that we can't replace it. I know over and over, it seems like this build is just going off the rails, but at least this detour isn't the worst bit of news we could have got. Whether this is an M96 that was manufactured after 05 as a replacement motor, or it's an M97 out of a 997, we have ourselves a newer motor. And not only that, we boxed this thing back up. We don't need it anymore, so we're going to sell this, and it may allow us to recoup enough money to hit our goal after all.
And you're going to feel happy putting the used clutch on it?
It's fine. Don't even start with that.
I thought it was a Porsche, you know, like it should be have OEM brand new parts.
It's a 996. In all seriousness, with past Porsche projects, a dual mass flywheel that's not shot seems to be best to just reuse it. That's the advice I've got from people who are very much in the know, more so than I am on these cars, so we're gonna roll with it here too.
Yep.
Oh yeah, nice and smooth. And now for the most fun part, as always, sticking the trans on. No matter how smoothly that clutch alignment tool went in and out, this will not, I guarantee it. Twist your way, there you go. You just go up more, up more. You're about right.
There we go.
Man, we just needed Eric. We had the wrong person helping. Hopefully after the fiasco we went through with this motor, we built up some karma. I don't know if karma is the right word, but that's what we're gonna go with. My initial hope with this whole deal was to do this so quickly that I didn't forget anything. Needless to say, I forgot quite a bit. Oh yeah, there we go. Perfect. We have 2 engine mounts and 1 trans mount in very loosely. So now we put this car in the air very gingerly.
Boom!
As I step under it, terrible timing, okay? I must admit, it is quite encouraging to finally see an engine and trans back in this car. And now, we just get to run back through the underside of it and play reverse Legos. Let's all collectively give it one of these. Let's hope this 996 project that got significantly out of hand is almost in the books. Fernando, fired up. Fernando, fired up. Give it another one. Third jump box is the charm. Do it again. Come on. What?
Again.
Again. Again. Come on. Come on. Yes. Yeah. There we go. Oh my God, that took forever. That did not sound great. Good question, Fernando. We got oil pressure, we're good. It's not like my car.
All right.
And look, you've learned something from the Porsche build days. I almost got scared for a split second when I saw coolant on the ground already. It's just coming out of the reservoir we left open. No big deal, that'll suck down eventually. All right, this thing doesn't sound half bad. Tell me why this is typical Porsche activities in this shop. I don't think there's been a time we've ever started a Porsche and it hasn't looked like that. Sure, we gotta top off some fluids, but on the other side of this thing, it really doesn't look bad at all. I'm pretty happy with this so far. This might be the first part of this build that's actually went better than expected. Trans works. Believe it or not, on the inside, everything's pretty good as well. We somehow, some way don't have any warning lights. I would not have guessed that the way this project went. Along with how my Porsche career has went in general. For a first start, I'll take it 100%. The only issue we're having, it didn't drink down any coolant. The front end of the car was a little bit higher, so now we're gonna try it like this, with the rear end jacked up sky high. As physics would suggest, that solved the issue. Our coolant temp's just above 180, right where it should be. We do have ourselves a check engine light now, which makes me feel much more comfortable with this whole deal. A Porsche without a check engine light, I mean, that's just not gonna work for us. And I do see, as I'm saying that it is now flashing, so I'm gonna go ahead and check it. Shall we take bets on this, Fernando?
Misfired code.
Misfire code. You're really up on that misfire. He thinks it's missing.
It sounds weird.
It's a naturally aspirated Porsche. They all sound kind of weird. Engine coolant temperature low. Skip that one.
What did it say?
It's a O2 sensor. It's a bad O2 sensor.
No, what it was before that?
The engine coolant temperature circuit low.
No. Oh, okay. What was that? No, what was that?
It's really tight in here, so I can't show it very well, but the clip's not seated the best. I can't tell if it was just like the outer shroud around it or the clip itself, but I'm thinking I'm going to try to burn my hands off and see if we can plug this in a little better. May have just been an oversight. Let's see if we just managed to get really lucky. Look, I know I'm not a naturally aspirated expert. These cars just sound a little goofy, but I'm 99% sure that this sounds much better. Now that I'm back here and have the comparison from the first round to go off of, it was definitely missing. Fernando nailed it. If you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know this does not happen often, but it looks like we just got away with an easy fix. I don't see any reason why we can't let this car cool down, reassemble it, and then first thing tomorrow, take it for a test drive. I'm a little conflicted here. I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I've set the bar so low to drive this thing. It's gonna be the slowest car I've ever driven. You know, it might actually surprise to the upside. It might be fun because I feel like this is practically driving a Porsche version of a Miata. First off, we gotta make sure, send it.
Yeah, come on.
I gotta let me warm it up first. Christ.
You see, that's what I'm talking
He's used to driving race cars out here. Now we get in the 911, the fun little daily driver type thing, if you want to call it that.
Well, it's not my fault. We've been doing 1,000 horsepower cars.
And now we're in one that makes not even 300. 296 to be specific. Okay. I Googled it right before we got in the car.
This is cool. It's quiet.
It is. This is exactly what I wanted out of this car.
Really quiet.
And I know we're talking about the driving experience and all that, but it's driving flawlessly.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to need an alignment. It's dead straight. We'll run it up the red line in a second. Maybe we shoot some German parts straight out of the engine, but we'll see how that goes in a bit. Sunroof. Oh, that switch is broken. All right, we'll take care of that a little bit later.
That torque, man, Jesus Christ.
I know you guys can't hear it, but I just got into it a little bit. You know, he felt it, obviously. It goes through all the gears just as it should. There's no weird noises. It's smooth. Haven't ran it up the red line yet. We'll do that now, I guess. Why not? Ready? Full-blown pull.
Go ahead.
Come on. Come on. 5,000. 6,000.
Okay.
7,000. Whoa.
It's not that bad.
Yeah. That's really not that bad, actually. I guess I can't really technically say the speed.
We were doing 40.
40 miles an hour.
That was quick.
Yes, that was a quick 20 to 40 mile per hour pull. That felt good though. When you clicked fourth gear, it felt really good. I'm genuinely impressed.
What about the brakes?
Let's lock them up. No. The
handbrake.
The brakes feel fine. Everything on this car feels really good. One could craft a really strong argument that the 911 we're driving right now is the worst or least desirable 911 of all time. You hear 996, nobody wants them from the jump. You hear 3.4 liter 996, 1999, one of the older ones. This is really kind of the black sheep of the Porsche family.
But the thing is, like, for how much money you pay for them,
I agree.
It's like,
Should we do the old roundabout test here?
Yeah.
That wasn't at us.
Damn.
Okay, it feels pretty good. It feels pretty good.
I don't want to imagine how all these tires are. Woo!
Alright. Compared to expectations, 10 out of 10.
Okay.
10 out of 10, truly. This, by all metrics, went way better than I thought it was gonna. Better yet, there's no leaks, there's no weird smells except a little bit of residual coolant, but all that positive stuff aside, I think it's time we go drag ourselves down a notch. Right now, I guess we have about $14,000 in the car. The goal was under 10. Clearly, we got some ground to make up, and this is what we have to do it with. The heads are good money, the crank's good money. The rest of it, though, is kind of tough. Now, if we don't meet our goal, I do have a backup plan that involves throwing more money at it, because at that point, I mean, why not? But before I can make that call, Fernando's got to get all this stuff photoed so I can list it online, and while he's doing that, I'm going to take care of the one other thing I hate about this car. Yep, you guessed it, I'm talking about this steering wheel. Not only is it very, very tan like the rest of the interior, but it is very 4-point, which I do not like, and it doesn't function very well, which is probably the most important part here. Now, I did save my 997 turbo steering wheel that I removed for an upgrade to use on this car, and I would have considered that a free 99 upgrade, but unfortunately, it did not fit. So off to eBay we went and dug ourselves just a little deeper in that financial hole. Now we can finally say goodbye to this ugly steering wheel that looks like it's from the 90s. Because it is from the 90s. Just seeing these two wheels next to each other, the difference is so night and day. This just looks so outdated. This looks like pretty much any other modern Porsche steering wheel, though you can tell it's a bit older because the airbag lines are starting to show through the airbag cover just a bit. I do have to admit, when I started looking for this 3-point wheel out of a 996, I figured it was going to be kind of cheap. The 997 ones aren't that expensive. Well, it turns out because they're not that easy to come by and they made a lot of 4-point steering wheel cars, they aren't cheap. Even with our now imaginary budget constraints, I gotta admit, this was 100% worth it. Now, I was originally kind of concerned that it wasn't gonna look great being black and a tan interior, but I think the fact that all that's black, the cluster, the center console, the radio bezel, I think it fits in nicely and breaks up some of that overbearing tan. So at least in my opinion, it's well worth the $700 we paid for it. Right, it is. I'm convincing myself and hoping to convince you guys as well. It is. That brings our total investment in this car at the moment with this steering wheel to $14,650. And if we're going to be completely transparent here, you and I didn't think that pallet of parts had a chance, and I mean a chance, to cover that cost. Well, it turns out it came really close. Once we got all these parts listed on eBay, it came to $6,009. Way more than I thought it was gonna be. Parts like the cylinder heads, we knew they were gonna be expensive. The crank, that was gonna pull a ton of money. It was the little stuff that really started to add up that kind of made this whole thing work. So if we take that $6,000 off the $14,650 we have in the car, that means we met our goal, right? We're significantly under $10,000. Yeah, unfortunately it doesn't work that way at all. We're asking $6,000 for all that stuff, and if you've watched the Salvage Story series, you know that what we ask on eBay doesn't always translate to what goes in our pockets. We have to ship that stuff. Some of it's just never gonna sell. It just simply is what it is. Or it might sit for 2 years before it does sell. If I really wanted to stretch reality here, I suppose you could theoretically say that if all that stuff sells to somebody that lives close by and we don't have to spend a ton in shipping, that we did meet our goal, and this would be an under $10,000 911. But to me, that seems like typical YouTube behavior that I don't necessarily want to engage in. So I'm going to say we didn't meet our goal, but we got an awesome car out of it, and just so there's no confusion whatsoever, I decided to just blow it out of the water and spend a little more money. This guy here is a 996 GT3 race car. It's pretty much the coolest version of what that could ever hope to be, and as you might imagine, it had some really awesome wheels on it.
Those are ripped, right?
Shut up. Just shut up. Specifically, they had BBS E88s, the most legendary, in my opinion, of course, Porsche racing wheels of all time. And I'm going to steal them.
And they're reps.
But if the choice is budget or awesome wheels, I think I made the decision that any and every car guy would make. These things are light. They're really light.
That's,
oh, yeah.
That's very cool.
On one hand, they look awesome, which I never doubted, but we just opened up another can of worms. We're gonna have to lower it and of course get tires because I can't daily drive the car with Hoosiers on it. She's a bit wide, just a bit. But if you look at it, it's almost all tire. The tires sit out another 5 millimeters past the wheels, I presume just because they're racing slicks. Yeah, this thing's a race car now. Absolute race car. Might as well be a GT3. But boy, does it look ridiculous in the front. Oh my God, this thing needs lowered badly now. That's not great.
I don't think this is ridiculous. It's what they call Carolina squat, right?
North Carolina passed the law to ban the modification last year.
Well guys, quite clearly this project got just a little bit out of hand, but how can you argue with the result? The car looks amazing, in my opinion, at least, except that front wheel gap and the fact that it's on slicks and the fact that it needs a few other things to make it absolutely perfect the way I want it. But hey, spending way more than you originally thought is kind of how the whole car game works. Not to mention, I don't think you're gonna find another 911 with these wheels that has some maintenance work done with a somewhat fresh engine for this kind of price. Being that I'm technically the one running this whole deal and I can call it a win or a loss, I'm gonna say it's a win. Why not? Let me know what you guys think. Is this truly a win or am I reaching here? But either way, it does seem, at least for now, the hunt for a truly cheap Porsche continues.
Adios.
In no way, shape, or form is that four-stroke. I thought you said you popped the lid to the coolant tank.
Did I? Who's working
did
on the
you?
car?
I'm drying the coolant, all right? Hey, am I making things up, or when you walked by earlier, you said something about you undid the lid to the coolant reservoir, or?
No.
You know you don't have to film this part, right? Hold. How'd I miss that? I think I just broke the oil fill tube, but I think I should have another one.
Say it again. What if you start and start smoking?
Look. Oh no, we're good. The front of the car was a good bit higher, so we're gonna jack the front end, or back end.
Front end.
Ouch, again, this is hot. God damn. Can't daily drive the car with Hoosiers on it. I mean, I guess I could.